Welcome back to the Lars Larson Show. Well, the government is constantly lately trying to pressure Americans to believe things and to shut up about other things as well. And it appears we've won a fairly major case. This came down on Friday, and John Vecchione joins me now, who's the lead counsel in this case brought by the New Civil Liberties Alliance. Mr. Vecchione, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Good to be here, Lars. I'm the lead counsel for New Civil Liberties, not in the whole case, but certainly for our clients.
But at least for your piece of it. So, Mr. Vecchione, tell me this. Would you sketch out what this case involving Missouri versus Biden was making the case, what the White House was doing wrong, what the federal government was doing wrong?
Yes. So the case was brought by the AGs of Missouri and Louisiana, and we joined with individual clients who had been kicked off of social media because of the government's activities. And what were those activities? The government had portals. The various agencies had portals into places like Facebook and Twitter and various social media where they could say what they liked and what they didn't like. And the White House officials were calling the social media companies and saying, take this down or do this or do that, or we don't like this stuff. In the meanwhile, in the background was the threat of government action if they didn't do what they want. And there's a whole host of subjects where they didn't want the opponents of the government's policies to be speaking. And they pressured, and coerced the social media companies to take down various messages that were uncongenial to the government.
Well, and in fact, we've talked about this subject generically, not about this case, but about those various pressures. Why, and this is more of a philosophical question, but why did anybody in the government think it was any of their business to decide what information people were allowed to say and what positions they were allowed to take?
Well, I think it all emerged, and Matt Taibbi spoke about this, but I really think it emerged from, even during the Cold War, you could call up the New York Times and say, hey, look, don't release that story because our spies will get killed. We need 3 days or 4 days or whatever to get our guys out. And that was just accepted. That was just something that happened all the time. Well, what happened was mission creep. They decided that everything that's an emergency to whoever the powers that be are is an emergency and is perfectly okay, just as you try to stop the Russians from killing your spies, to stop someone from saying, Hunter Biden's laptop, is false. So what happened was it was just mission creep far beyond the bounds of anything that's ever been done before, and just focused on anything the administration didn't like, not having to do with anything that we would call national security.
Well, and I'm talking to John Vecchione, who's the lead counsel for the New Civil Liberties Alliance. It also comes with a kind of arrogance that says we know what the truth is and we will define the truth, and nothing but the truth we define shall be allowed to hit the ears or eyeballs of the American public.
There's no question. That's exactly right. They think that on all these topics, they get to say what the truth is, and that somehow the social media companies are at fault if they don't take down the opponents of these views. And one of the I don't want to miss this story because it's one of the most hilarious things that happened in a case where a lot of awful things happen. Well, they had the social media companies put up a net around COVID-19 misinformers, right? And one of the things their algorithm would do was check how many times you were talking about COVID-19. Well, once they put that all in, the president's Twitter feed, or Instagram, I think it was Instagram, got disappeared, knocked off. So the White House is calling up, and they're emailing the social media company. They're emailing them laced with profanity. What are you doing? We've just lost the whole thing. I can't believe you're doing that. And then F this and F that and F the other thing. And they got caught in their own net, and they didn't like it at all.
Did that at all bring them to some kind of moment, like a come to Jesus moment, where they said, hold on, if this is a net that's actually catching our guy in it as well, because I think they view Joe Biden as their guy, wouldn't that make somebody realize this? We've gone too far. Was there any sign of that?
No. the only people I will tell you for you and I think some, and probably some people in your audience, we probably think like the tech guys are all kind of these San Francisco liberal guys who are happy to do whatever the administration, as long as the Democratic administration wants to do.
I'd plead guilty to that, John, if you had me on the stand.
Right, exactly. We think that, but by looking at these emails, look at what's happening. They were pushing back. They were saying, wait a minute, why are we doing this? Where's your proof of that? Where's your proof of this? Facebook actually sent an email to the government saying, people have a First Amendment right to have these views, and what will happen if you cut off these views is there'll be more conspiracy-minded people, and the health authorities won't have the respect that they're supposed to have. I mean, I'm almost quoting verbatim what Facebook told them would happen.
Well, and so here's what's crazy, John. It should be. I mean, in a perfect world, the Constitution constrains only the government in any case. The private companies are not, except as you pointed out, the private companies owe much of their existence to either the sanction of the government. The government says you have Section 230, you've got all this, and if the government decides we want to shut this social media company down, they can get away with doing it. And the social media companies knew that. So here they are trying to educate the people, our government masters, as to what the limits of the First Amendment put on the government. And there's more realization of that in the private sector, which is not constrained by the First Amendment, than there was in the government sector, which is constrained by the First Amendment.
That's what we're seeing. I mean, I wouldn't have believed it starting off this case. I wouldn't have believed it. I would have thought, oh, they're all in cahoots, right? But we didn't. You don't see that all the time. You see pushback, and a part of it is, look, how do they make their money? They make their money by having more eyeballs. They don't want to throw eyeballs off their area. But really, I mean, some of their arguments to the government and some of their requests for solid information were something you or I might send if we were worried about like national security. Right? I started off this.
Well,
thing.
So, and John, when I was a reporter, we would occasionally do a story. And there were a couple of occasions where we'd go to the FBI for comment, and they'd say, hey, by the way, you may be about to completely, torpedo an investigation we've had going for a long time, and you might put people in danger. And if they persuaded us that, we'd hold back for a bit because we had no desire to get somebody killed, but we'd also tell them this is not forever. This is maybe for a day or two, and then we're going to go with the story. And I think even John Kennedy said, oh, I wish the press had called me out sooner on the Bay of Pigs or words to that effect. I mean, there's a realization you can't do this kind of garbage all the time.
Right, but they still think they can, and this is one of the the Fifth Circuit. That I'll give you breaking news today. The Fifth Circuit turned down the government's request to stay the injunction. So the Fifth Circuit cut back somewhat on Judge Doughty's injunction, but the main findings that the government was violating the First Amendment and they got to stop, and that various agencies had to stop doing this, including the FBI, that's all still there. But the government didn't even like that because they want to, I guess, we don't know exactly what's going to happen. This thing came out Friday. Monday, they've moved for, a stay of the Fifth Circuit's
So they're
order.
still fighting it. They're fighting for the right to censor. Is it unfair to say it that way, John?
No, we say it that way all the time. We put it in pleadings, and nobody sanctions us for that because it's true.
Unbelievable. And by the way, they did undercut, and this kind of garbage undercut an awful lot of the public's trust, if there's any left, in the medical establishment and the government as well. So exactly what they were concerned about happened because of what the Biden White House was doing.
Right. Jay Bhattacharya is one of our clients, and we have others. Exactly, and there's a number of others, all of whom are scientists. Jessica, who's she runs a website about your freedom to reject vaccines and to make your own health decisions in Louisiana, and she was all taken off.
Unbelievable. That's John Vecchione. John, I'm up against a break, and I'm sorry for that. John Vecchione is the lead counsel in this case in the Fifth Circuit by the New Civil Liberties Alliance, and you're listening to The Lars Larson Show.